Hey everybody, I'm Eddie Starr, and this is the College of Rock and Roll Knowledge. Class is now in session. This is where the music and culture that shaped a generation live on, and my own path through the world of rock and roll.
Hello, Eddie.
Abe Bradshaw.
How's it going?
All right, how are you doing?
All right. Thank you for not recording the video so I could wear my sweatshirt and hat.
Oh, well, as I explained, I think it keeps people on point. I think with a lot of the podcasts where they have the people sitting up there, there's more of a tendency to watch what they're doing and watch them rather than listening to what's being said. So that's why it's only the audio.
Good. We don't want to distract them with our good looks.
Oh, that's right. All right. You went on and off. So what's been happening?
Not much, man. Just trying to stay productive and creative during Groundhog's Day.
Yeah. And last I think we spoke, you were doing music supervision, right?
Yes, I've been doing that pretty consistently since about 2004.
Okay.
I just realized that I did not get a chance to close my windows, so if it ever is too loud from the street, just let me know and I can close those for you.
No, it's fine.
I mean, you're saying this now, but I live in a very loud intersection.
Well, do you want to close the windows?
I probably should. Last night, like almost nightly, there's these people who like turbocharge their cars and they just like rev them so insanely loud. And some guy was doing that and he spiraled out of control right outside my building and like flew into all the parked cars on the side of the street. It was quite a commotion. It was also hilarious because it's about time they totally wrecked. But I will, I'm going to close these really quickly. I'll be right back, okay?
All right.
Thank you, man. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
I'm happy that this is not live. I love having four windows, but not when I have to close them all in a hurry.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things I've been thinking about that I really wanted to ask you about. And a lot of people who work in music for a label or, music producer, people who are behind the scenes, a lot of times you don't really know what brought them to to where they are in terms of music. And like, for instance, I was thinking about, I've known you, we've known each other 15 years. Can you believe that?
No, I can't.
And I thought about what do I know about Abe Bradshaw? Well, I think I knew you were in the Navy, correct?
I was, yes.
I know that you worked for RCA Records, right?
Kind of. I work for their distribution company.
Okay. And, whenever I think of Willie Nile, I think of you, of course. When I hear him.
That's an honor.
Sort of synonymous with him. And I thought I would ask you, what type of music were you into growing up? Or do you have a memory of like the first thing that you were into?
Yes, lots of memories. I have had a tremendous passion and love for music since day one. I was very fortunate that my dad is a huge music fan, and his dad would often share music with him because he was a big music fan, mostly with classical music and opera. So most of the albums we had around our home were classical and opera. And my dad was really good whenever we, go in the car and drive. If we listened to the classical station, then he would always be able to say what the composer was, what the piece was, what the movement was. It was unbelievable. And I really wanted to be like him, where I had such an intense knowledge of classical music. I never ever came close to that because I got way more into other styles down the road. But just kind of being that expert was really appealing to me. And so eventually I started listening to, the modern radio and everything. And I had an older brother who was 5 years. I mean, I still have an older brother. He's 5 years older than me. And, he was my hero, of course, as every younger brother can understand, and especially 5 years difference, which is quite big compared to most. But so he was way cooler than me, being 15 when I'm 10. So when I was about 9, he started getting into Bruce Springsteen. And, I grew up right outside of Cleveland, and Cleveland's like a big supporter of Springsteen from the early days. It was like kind of his second home outside of New Jersey and New York, where he felt most at home. And he said that quite a bit in interviews and stuff, that he's always had a big appreciation for how supportive Cleveland has been. So when my brother got the cassette tape of The River, which was like right before all the insanity started happening with the Born in the USA phenomenon, like in 83. 84 is when Born in the USA came out. So I just started really getting into Bruce Springsteen, and my dad did as well, which was really cool. And so it like became a bonding experience for me and my family. And I don't know, not many people are, I mean, obviously a lot of people are huge Bruce fans, but I have a lot of friends in the music business who are not. And I understand why. I understand that, if they didn't discover them at 9, it might not have changed their life the way that it did with me. But I think Bruce was the perfect artist for me to discover for 2 reasons. Number one, because he is a music fan himself, and he loves exposing artists that he likes, either artists that were his heroes that he, would support and offer exposure to, that he felt didn't get the attention they deserved. And then also like his heroes who were famous that he would, shamelessly say that he was a fan of. And he is such a fan that it made me feel good to be a music fan too. And then also like with contemporary music, he always stays up on all the good bands and would offer exposure to a lot of my favorite artists along the way. So he's always a big supporter of Ramones, and so I picked up a Ramones album. He was a big supporter of Social Distortion, so I picked up a Social Distortion album. He introduced me to some of my favorite bands along the way in genres that you would expect. So I got into punk rock through Bruce. I got into soul music and R&B through Bruce. I even got into reggae through Bruce because of Jimmy Cliff. He's a big fan of Jimmy Cliff. So I was real lucky that he became my hero so young, because it really opened my library to a lot of different styles and great artists. And the other reason why it was great that I became a Bruce fan is that his music is full of a lot of optimism and hope and dreams. And he made it feel like, even though I grew up in a small town, that I could escape my small town and I could move to the big city and I can follow any dream that I had. And it was really through his music that made me want to do more than most people in my hometown wanted to do, and always made me a dreamer. And so it had a huge impact on my life that could never, ever be quantified. So that was it, man. Bruce Springsteen, thank you for everything.
Wow. So how did radio factor into your experience in your formative years? Was,
It was tremendously, um, tremendously informative. But I also grew up at the beginning of MTV too, which is what helped propel Bruce into being such a superstar, because of his really releasing an album like Born in the USA, where there's 8 hit songs, doesn't hurt. But then to have the element of video on top of it is amazing. But to get back to radio, um, like Cleveland has the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame now. And yeah, people say it should be in New York or LA. But the reason why it has Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is because of one reason alone, and that is because of WMMS, which was the Cleveland rock station. And there's a DJ there named Kid Leo that I would listen to every day. And they would play Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run every Friday at 5 p.m. And it was like their welcome to the weekend. And that's what, established just like the hope and optimism of rock and roll, is that, like, what better way to start your weekend than listening to Born to Run? And yeah, MMS had a huge impact on my life. And every year it would win Rolling Stones poll for greatest radio station. Then there was a big controversy that they rigged the ballot box. I don't care if they did or not. I still would put them up against any other radio station in the world at the time. And also, Cleveland is where I believe rock and roll first hit the airwaves with Alan Freed back in, I don't know what year, probably in the late 50s. I'll have to look it up. So yeah, Cleveland being a rock and roll town really got me into music, and the radio stations definitely did.
How did it function like at school for you with music? Was that sort of like, because one of the things that's, that has sort of really interested me, I grew up in Southern California out there, and music was very important at school.
Right.
It was like that is where, the magazines, just, finding out cool new stuff. And I guess during this whole process of talking to so many other people, you learn, it's really interesting how either an artist, like in your case, Bruce Springsteen, opened the door to a lot of different things. But I think in terms of like the culture, music was so important. The record store was so important, at least, for me in that aspect. So I'm curious about that, record stores. How did that work at school for you? Because, I don't think there's too big of an age difference between us. Mm-hmm. But how did, record stores and all those things factor into growing up when music really was the dominant thing? I mean, there were video games or other things like that, but really, at least, for me, or how I looked at it in terms of my perspective, music was it.
Yeah,
And
without a doubt.
even if you were a pop person, you were reading Tiger Beat, and you know, it was very different that way. So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, absolutely. These are great questions, Eddie. I'm not usually asked about the finer details about music discovery, which is always interesting. So this is really the first time I've thought about this stuff in a while, but I appreciate it. Um, well, I grew up in a really small town of less than 5,000 people on Lake Erie. And as the crow flies, Cleveland was only about a 45-minute drive. But to us, that seemed like an eternity. And, I grew up in a modest family. I mean, my dad was a school teacher, and my mom stayed at home and raised my brother and I. But we always felt like we did not have enough money to be able to like go shopping or go to stores or anything. So I really didn't get to go out and purchase much. So I was really because there were really no record stores around. I think the closest one was like 30 minutes or 45 minutes away. And when I did have the opportunity to go, maybe I could afford one tape, but I'd have to really do the research and know it was worth my hard-earned money, because it might be a while before I get another tape, So when it came to the time when I was just going into like high school, the invention of the compact disc came out, and my parents were so awesome that I begged for a compact disc player, and I was like one of the first kids in my school to have one, as I should have been, because I wore my music love on my sleeve, and thankfully, right away, they signed me up for the Columbia House Compact Disc Club, and I was able to pick my first 7 CDs, which seemed like a windfall. And I rode the beauty of the Columbia House Compact Disc Club my entire high school life. I just would save up enough money and I'd order another 7, and then they'd offer some crazy deal and I'd be able to get more. And it really worked out where I got a ton of compact discs for not that much money.
I think it was
But
like any the first.
yeah, I mean, that was how they lured you in. But yeah, but it really did end up turning out where I did get a lot of CDs for very little money.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't know if I was like able to work the system or if they really didn't want to make money.
Oh,
but,
they were really great. They were really good. I mean, everybody. I had the Columbia House thing as well.
Yeah, so that was really cool. It was kind of like, Spotify before Spotify, like offering like a way to hear more music. And I love Spotify, which I'm sure we'll get down to that subject in the future. But as a music fan, the more music, the better. And I think that if the fans are happy, then it's good for the music business all around. But as far as like growing up and what I was able to hear, I mean, I wasn't really able to be exposed to many like cool underground bands that I was able to later in life. I liked all the bands that were big at the time, and I went through like the early stages of hip hop. Like the ones that were really popular. Even I really liked MC Hammer. I'm not going to deny that. I thought it was so cool. Can't touch this. Give me a break. And then Digital Underground and Public Enemy. Like I loved all that stuff. And then and my high school was a very like poor white high school, and so obviously everyone got really big into Guns N' Roses and Metallica, who I mean are still some of my favorite albums and concerts to this day, and it really got me into heavy metal. And of course, Metallica covers some legends in their music too, like Misfits and you know, Queen and all these other bands that I would eventually grow to like because of Metallica. So it's amazing, like the way mainstream music and the bands that quote unquote sell out, as long as they're really good, they at least will help the cooler bands get exposure down the road anyway, because they've inspired these really great bands like Bruce Springsteen and Metallica, who are legitimately great. It's just that they happen to gain a lot of popularity because of their talent, and they at least are able to expose a lot of their heroes to a lot more exposure than they ever would have received without them.
Did you ever tape stuff off the radio?
Always.
Yeah.
I would be sitting there waiting for hours for them to hopefully play the one, and then I finally am in another room and I hear it finally start, and I run in and I push record, and it's so frustrating. And then they begin to do your favorite part of the song, and then the DJ would start talking over it, and you're just like, this is horrible, horrible. But yeah, I mean, so many tapes that would just get warped and get eaten up, and then I'd make mixtapes for my first girls that I liked, and that was the greatest gift I could give them, was the gift of the music that I thought was good. And any date I'd go on, I'd have every second of the music that was going to be playing on the way, so that they could hear this song, and so Bruce could say the words that I'm like too nervous to say. Or any Bob Seger or Tom Petty or Neil Young or Bob
What was your
Dylan.
favorite Tom Petty album?
I mean, back then, it was probably like Hard Promises, but that was before all his resurgence that came in the early 90s. But that happened, I think, when I was still in high school. Yeah, I mean, Full Moon Fever and all that stuff. It's great. I really liked U2. I really liked Midnight Oil. Yeah, it's crazy to think about. The first CD I bought, though, with my own money was Roy Orbison. Again, another artist that Bruce got me into. So,
wow,
this is crazy, man. I haven't thought about this stuff for another lifetime.
Bruce Springsteen.
I know. That's going to be the title of this episode.
What about like in the 80s and new wave? Were you ever into any of the new wave that
No, it didn't reach me. Wow. I mean, the closest thing I had was like when I was allowed to watch MTV. Like, I grew up in a really religious household, so there were certain times when I could watch it and couldn't. And also I was a responsible student, so I had to do my homework and stuff. But, I remember all those videos, but that was really before 120 minutes or my ability to watch 120 minutes. So most of those bands, there's no way that they would even enter my ears, because it was all mainstream top 40 stuff or old rock and roll that reached me.
To Casey Kasem or
yeah, absolutely. I would listen.
Yeah,
I would listen to that, and sometimes I'd like the top 40, but most of the time it's the same junk that it has been always. It's like all the good stuff is in. What's that?
Rockline. Remember Rockline with Bob Coburn?
I don't.
Yeah. Well, I guess
I remember Loveline with Drew.
I remember Loveline. Dr. Drew. Yeah, everybody listened to that. I mean, it was so outlandish just to hear all the problems before.
Yeah.
No, Rockline was a thing where, they'd have the band or artists on there. I think it was like Sunday night. In LA, it was on KLOS. And, you could call in and ask questions and stuff like that. And, that along with the Seventh Day, where they'd play a whole album, the front and back, A and B side. So that was cool. That's really interesting. So
Yeah, it was probably past my bedtime.
How did that lead to the music business for you?
Well, I got really into theater and musicals, Broadway shows throughout my high school. And that was also when, these big mega musicals were getting popular. And I really liked, Les Miserables and Phantom of the Opera and all the old, like cooler Andrew Lloyd Webber stuff when he was a lot more rock based, like Jesus Christ Superstar and Joseph of the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And I became like a really big fan of that stuff just because, again, it was another great musical outlet. So I assumed that I was going to go to, some art school and be an actor. And I always, number one, wished I could work in the music business, but it was really kind of told to me very early on that only rich people from New York and LA get to work in the music business, and that if I ever tried, I wouldn't be successful at it. So that was not my parents, by the way, but it was a lot of other people that I told about that, and they're just like, no, it's impossible. So assuming it was impossible, and then also assuming that I wouldn't be successful as an actor, I decided to go the responsible way when I started getting letters from colleges, because I was a really, really good tennis player in high school. And so I was being recruited by a lot of schools. And my dad told me, being a school teacher, he told me like day one of kindergarten that he and my mom were not going to spend one dime for me to go to college, so that if I wanted to go to college, that I would have to work hard, be a good student and a good athlete so that I could get a full scholarship. And so I did those things, and I was offered lots of full scholarships. But unfortunately, like, Harvard, Yale, and the Ivy League schools didn't offer those. So I was going to go to something like University of Michigan or Northwestern. And then I got some pamphlets from West Point and the Naval Academy in Annapolis. And once I saw those, I said, this is where I want to go, where it's a good school. I pay $0 to go, and it'll be the hardest challenge I've ever had, because I guess I'm a bit like of a masochist when it comes to like giving myself challenges. So all I did is I applied to those two. I got accepted to both. I visited both of them. And then I went to the Naval Academy, which was the responsible thing to do, but a million away from the music business.
Wow. That's something else. Well, one of the things I've always, at least since I've known you, I've really admired about you is your passion for the music. You're one of the few people I know I've ever known in the music industry who truly, has a passion for music. The way that you almost like, the way you would idealize it. You know what I mean? That someone would. And I see where that, it's interesting to hear where that comes from. And, the culture of really at a time, when music was really sort of the dominant thing for teenagers, What do you think today about all the different, avenues of music. Do you think that that's led to more discovery, or do you think it's, uh, you know, it's very much it's there, but can you find it? Or do other people find it? Like you talked about how Bruce Springsteen led you to, oh yeah, I'm going to check out this album. Or, like for me, after I think, I got into, of course, it was Joan Jett, and, then, the Sex Pistols, and then all of that, reading articles was like, oh my God, I'm going to go check out this glitter stuff, from the early 70s, and Mark Bolan and T-Rex and stuff. And
Right.
I think that, but back then, the interesting thing is you had to really have some uh, curiosity. You really had to go and go to the store and find it. And a lot of times in the store, you wouldn't even find it. The other day, it was interesting. I was standing with a guy outside when we were doing at the Triad Theater here in New York. And he said to me, I asked him, I said, do you know what out of print means? And he didn't know what out of print meant.
Mm-hmm.
What it meant. So I explained to him. And then he said, he told me, he said, Eddie, you're out of print.
That is awesome.
Yeah, I guess, and to me, it was really sort of shocking, because I guess there's this, when you're in like a whole, I guess you could say a bubble, or, you think that, you have certain reference points that you use for certain things and certain time periods that you take for granted that other people know about that. So I guess that's the thing. Do you think that these other things, now all these records that I had, some of them I had to search, going to record conventions and and asking people, and people not knowing what I was talking about. And now, it's on Spotify.
Oh yeah, even better.
And now, I mean, do you think other people will find those same records just because they're out there?
I think that everything about technology that has happened over the past 25 years has been nothing but a positive thing for music and the discovery of music. And as far as being a music fan, I definitely understand why certain companies have been upset about the way things have gone over the past 25 years. But I think for the most part, in regards to the fan, it is all positive. And in regards to 97% of the artists, it's been positive. It's that, yes, there are some people that were negatively impacted by it and refuse to move along with it in a positive way and just choose to like complain about it. But everything else has been really, really positive. The part where, as a music fan and also being someone who's worked in the music business for 2 decades now, is what frustrates me the most is that for the past 20 years, at least, maybe more, 25 years, kids growing up don't have the same modes of discovery that we do, as far as you were saying, having the trusted gatekeepers to what is the new cool thing about music. And what that was for me when I was on my own, out of my hometown, even when I was in the Navy, which isn't really the most creative place, but I was still an insatiable music fan. At least now I was able to discover new music, and I was just like a kid in a candy store, just like could not wait to hear more and more cool bands. And it took like UMTV Raps and 120 Minutes and RPM that really got me into so many bands. And I wish there was something like that for kids nowadays, that was like, oh, every kid who likes music watches this these 2 hours of music videos that have been curated by really big fans of what's cool. And now this is the cool stuff. And it's great for those bands because it gave them exposure they never would have had without. And they're still like some of the biggest artists today that were broken because of 120 minutes. But ever since it stopped, there just hasn't been that like trusted source. It turned for a while into certain TV shows where the music supervisor was a trusted person, and every time the OC had a new song on it that would just blow up, or Grey's Anatomy, or whichever one it was. But then those began to die out too. And I can't even think of the last one where it was a phenomenon like that. And so for the past 10 years, I can't really think of the trusted source that could make or break a career. I mean, even getting a guest appearance on Saturday Night Live has lost. That used to be like the guaranteed thing, or the Super Bowl, of course. But and I just feel really, really upset about that. And that's kind of what I've been ranting about so much on my soapbox recently, is like, I'm just trying to find the group of people who want to make that with me. Like, somehow, how can we create the trusted source of new great music? Because one of the most frustrating things that I go through, and almost weekly when I used to go out and have meetings and meet people and tell them I worked in music, is like, nothing aggravates me more than when people say, oh, music sucks now. It used to be so much better. And I just want to grab them and shake them and say, that's because you've lost your curiosity. Because anyone who actually looks or has any sort of at all being adventurous with how they click around Spotify, like, it is unbelievable how much amazing music is. It's overwhelming. And I would put any year over the past 25 years up against any year in history. And yeah, you might not be able to know them as well because you haven't heard them 100 times, but these bands that are making such great music now, it's harder to get discovered. It's harder to break through the noise. So you got to be better than you ever were. I mean, imagine how many albums were released by some of our favorite artists that were just terrible. I mean, people did that to make a statement back in the day. Neil Young made 3 straight albums just because he was angry at Warner Brothers that were almost unlistenable. And he intentionally made them that way. Like, no artist could do that now and have a shot, like, they took their extremely precious position of being one of the few artists that was able to break through the noise back then. And as an artistic statement, they would just create a bunch of junk. And yeah, you look back now, and I mean, I'm a huge Lou Reed fan. I mean, how can you not be? But like, when you make Metal Machine music just to insult your record company, people who have invested millions of dollars to help make you a household name, and now it's viewed as, legendary, blah, blah, blah. But like, you can't do that as an artist now. And it's really humbled a lot of artists. And so you don't get the gross parts of being a rock star. And if you do, I just don't think it's tolerated as much anymore. A lot of really great musicians who probably could have been as bratty as they wanted to be back in the past, now it's like there's just a shorter rope for that. And I think that's great. I think that if you do your job and you are a great musician, you want to make your fans happy, and you want to, do a good job at being an artist that they'd be proud to listen to. And I don't know, I'm getting like way more into details about being an artist as opposed to being a fan. But I don't know. I think what I want to make most clear is that there's just so much great music out there, and I'm trying my best. And I feel like I'm fighting against. I'm Don Quixote fighting against the windmills about trying to show how much great music there is right now if you give it a shot. And I think the only reason why people don't is because they have their songs they like and they're happy just to keep listening to them. But for the people who have the ability to put new songs in their ears, I think that's where we need to kind of unite and find a way to make it fun again, to the discovery of new music fun again.
Yeah. Well, I also think too, like for me, a lot of the music that I found out about was given to me by, like, for instance, the record shop owner, store, clerk, kids at school who were older than me, would say, oh, you like this, and, you need to check out this. And,
Right.
or you see, for instance, like, look at the albums that Iggy did in Berlin with Bowie, The Idiot and Lust for Life. How long did those albums take to really break?
Oh, without a doubt.
I spent $300 for Lust for Life on vinyl at a little store down in Long Beach. I had searched and searched for that album, and I had really fallen in love with The Passenger when Susie and the Banshees did it. I had heard it there, and then I went and found it. And then it was funny because, like, I spent $300 for that album, and like a week later, that's when the RCA reissues came out initially or something on TV. So it was sort of like, all right. But yeah, you're right about that. I mean, MTV, we weren't really allowed to watch MTV growing up,
Right.
same thing, but it was like, we didn't even have cable really, or it wasn't on all cable providers. So there's this whole thing that's spoken out about how, everybody, it's just assumed that everybody had MTV in their house, where most of the people I knew didn't have MTV yet. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or I had one friend who had it, and everybody would go over there
Right. Totally. That's what I did for
try
the
and
first
hang
few
out
years.
and
Yeah.
do that.
I would always go to my friend's house because they had MTV, and I never said why. They probably thought it was to play basketball or something, but no.
Yeah, no,
I
everybody did.
wanted to see MTV. I want
Or
my
the
MTV.
VCR. A friend of mine, they had a VCR too. So they had a VCR, and do you remember On TV?
No.
It was like before cable, but it was a little box, and it said On, and you turned it on, and you had movies that would come on like cable movies, like we watch now, like on HBO.
I never
And
saw that technology.
they had a but they had a VCR too. And it was like, man, yeah, they have MTV. So yeah, of course we're going to hang out there and
Totally.
and do that. Did you ever go to record conventions?
No.
Oh wow, record conventions were cool. Used to go over in Buena Park. They had this great big, I forgot, I don't know if it was like a civic center or something, and you could go in there and they'd have booths. And
I've been to several since I left my hometown, but back in my hometown.
back in the day you didn't. Okay, I was
right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I've been to tons of record conventions, but I didn't even know they existed back then.
Wow.
I went to more baseball card conventions back then. But yeah, I mean, like you were saying earlier, though, it was almost nearly impossible to find a rare release, or if something was brand new, to like eventually get it so you owned it was nearly impossible because I mean, how many times do we listen to a song and love it, but the DJ didn't say what it was after? And so you just kept asking everyone, hey, what's that song that's about blue cheese? Do you know? And they're like, what? And it's just like, you couldn't find out. But like now, if you hear something, you can Shazam it, and then you can have it playing again in less than 30 seconds. You know, it's so awesome. Like, how cool is that? We never have to go through the struggles we used to.
No,
I mean,
I just
I could hear a song and never hear it again for 2 years, you know?
Yeah.
And there would be no way to hear it again. And you're just like, man, I don't know what that Bob Seger song was, but I cannot wait to hear it again. Then you look for it in stores, they didn't have it, and you order it and they couldn't get it. And then finally you were able to get it again. And like, oh man, this isn't as good as I remember, or something like that, or it's even better, you know? And then now you don't have to deal with that. You can hear it again as many times as you want, so quickly. And that's a beautiful thing.
Do you remember the whole thing with the seat between the CD and vinyl? Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, it was horrible.
Like, say, oh, you know, like I remember one guy in our group who got a CD player. And of course we said he was a sellout.
Yeah, of course.
We're doing that. And it's funny because the last podcast I did, I actually a couple of years ago reconnected with someone I went to high school with. Mm-hmm. And he's a guy who turned me on to a lot of great stuff, you know, Generation X, a lot of the bands that really were important for me, who I loved. And we were talking about that. And I said, do you remember that back then we could not say that we liked Journey or that we liked Boston, and we couldn't even put it on our, do you remember Peachy folders?
No.
Oh, Peachy folder was very important in a way. It was sort of like this, you didn't have a Peachy folder with it was like a traditional, just like a folder that you put stuff in for school, but you'd put all the names of the bands that you liked on it, you know, or you would cut out stuff and make your statement with that. And that was very important. So we couldn't put any bands on there that were deemed not, you know.
We definitely did the same thing, but I've never heard that term before. It might be a California term.
Yeah, it's probably a California thing. But of course,
we definitely put we wore our influences on our sleeves of our book sleeves.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, and you know, of course, you know, I was made fun of for being a Springsteen fan, but I was also a fan of like the cooler bands, like I said, like Metallica and Guns N' Roses. I had something really important to add on to that, but it totally escaped me. I apologize.
Oh, no worries. Springsteen, though. With Springsteen, it's interesting, though, because Springsteen really was a product of the long game. You know, right. I mean, Springsteen had been around forever prior to that.
That's 11 years.
Huh?
11 years.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, when you're, you know, a teenager or whatever, 11 years.
Oh, yeah. No, back like, then it was. I mean,
even in the music industry, especially in the music industry back then, 11 years I think would be a long time and several albums. But I mean, it also goes to what it used to be about, you know, in terms of development and really,
you know, and that's the thing.
They're still around. I would make the argument that's why anybody who was really developed throughout the 70s, like Fleetwood Mac, Bruce Springsteen, all those people, that's why they have really had the careers they had, because it was very, you know, when you could, it's what's at the right place, right time type thing. And
I mean, I agree 100%. I'm sorry to cut you off, but this is, I don't want to forget again. And I also remembered what I was going to say, and it's very similar. So I can say them both at the same time. So like with everything, the original discussion was the vinyl album versus the compact disc, you know. With everything like this, the old music business versus now, there are things that were great about the old way that are worse now, and there are things that really sucked about the old way that are better now. And I think that's with major label versus independent label. It's vinyl versus compact disc. It's compact disc versus Spotify. It's MTV versus no MTV. But the thing about what you're saying about like Fleetwood Mac, Bruce Springsteen, and another one of, I have like two all-time favorite musicians. They both released their first two albums in 1973, and they both did not have that great a success in their first few albums. And that made them both rarities, because back in the day, if you didn't make it your first one or two albums, you would have been dropped. And the fact that both of these guys were able to keep going is a testament not only to people finally catching up to their talent and their talent catching up to like reaching the place it could be, but it's also like, thankfully, those record labels probably, had to fight a lot of battles for them so that they wouldn't get dropped because they believed in them. So kudos to the people that kept their careers going, because if you would have looked at, Bruce, who released Greetings from Asbury Park, didn't do well. The Wild Enos and the E Street Shuffle, which is a bizarre album. It's one of my favorites, but no one would ever listen to that and think that if you would give this guy 2 more years, he's going to release Born to Run. No one would ever assume that this guy would be able to make something that great. But thank to Columbia Records for allowing him to do it. And it was probably because he was signed by John Hammond, who they trusted because he had also signed Bob Dylan. So they're like, well, Bob Dylan became successful even though his first album wasn't that big. His second album was. But the other favorite of mine is Tom Waits, who, really never achieved any level of real commercial success to this day. I mean, now he is obviously known by everyone who's a fan of music, but if you walked to any normal person in the street, they would not know who he was. They might be able to, if you told them he wrote a particular song that became a hit by another artist, they would probably know that his song was used in Shrek or something like this. But again, I mean, this is a testament to, him being a genius, but also very much a testament to his, the people on his professional side that believed in his genius enough where they probably had to fight a lot of battles to keep him signed or to sign him when other people wouldn't. And thanks to those Mavericks as well for having the guts and the foresight to keep those careers alive, because we could be sitting here now without those two artists and all they've brought, if they would have just given up, or if the record labels would have given up on them. So I don't know. It's the same thing with vinyl versus compact disc. I mean, like you said, at first it was not cool to switch,
I think it was more of a, well, in Southern California, it was very cliquey.
Right.
I mean, it was very cliquey. So you had certain people who were, who would say, "Oh, well, it's vinyl, man, all the way." And there was a whole thing with, I think Bowie came out and said something about it, and then that became like the the new.
Right. But how many houses do you walk into now where they are proudly displaying their vinyl collection or their compact disc collection anymore? Like back then, everywhere you'd go, you just see everyone's collections. Now it's not about that, because now, I mean, if you have to move your vinyl collection more than 10 times, I mean, that vinyl collection is getting pared down every time. And then to get to the point where they're like, man, I got to get rid of this,
What about all the vinyl, the explosion of vinyl that you see?
I mean, it's a very, very fine print headline. It is not that big of an explosion. I mean, I love vinyl as much as anybody, but as the amount of times I've moved in my life in as few vehicles as I've owned, it's like, no, I'm paring it down to my faves, and that's it. And I'm going to enjoy those. But I can carry 500 million albums in my cell phone.
Wow.
So is it really worth all that hassle and the storage fees and the strain on your back and the fact that they could melt? It's like there's a lot of drawbacks too, even though I get it. I love the sound of the crackling vinyl. I love dropping the needle down. I love all that romanticism. The same way I love baseball and that it still takes, 2.5 hours for the shortest game. I love that. But I also understand why people just like watching the highlights too, to each their own.
That whole practical side that you talked about when you were going to school isn't sort of like.
No, it's just I just understand all sides of the spectrum now. I used to be my nickname when I first started was the angry young man, my first couple jobs in the music business, because I just like looked at everyone else there as just bean counters who just got lucky to get a job in the music business, but I was the only one who deserved it because I was the only true music fan there, and I was the only one doing it only for the music. And that's why I left and started my own record label, because I was angry and I wanted to expose these artists that I thought were amazing to the world, and no one else would sign them. I started my own label because I took them to label after label and got turned down again and again. My friends that I thought were really talented. And then I said, okay, I got to do it myself, because two things to a fault about me is that I thought I knew everything, which turned out to be massively incorrect. I always thought that I was the only one who cared about music, which is partially correct. And I also, from day one, I get this from my dad as well, is if something's great, I want to share it with the world. Like, I love show and tell. And if you make the best cheeseburger in town, I want to tell everyone who talks to me about cheeseburgers about this cheeseburger. And if no one else is going to spread the word, then I will spread that word, So I still am doing that, and I always will. But now I am doing it while paying $0 to do it. Whereas before I tried to, start a company around a business that was changing so quickly, and the monetary system was changing so quickly, that I, put all the risk on myself and basically, sold the shirt off my back to try to spread the word, when now, thankfully, there are so many smarter ways to spread the word and more affordable ways. And you can do just as much for $4,000 now that I lost $400,000 doing 15 years ago. So I think that's a beautiful thing. There's nothing wrong with that. So it just really comes down to artists creating great content, continue doing that. But instead of waiting for someone else like me to come around and invest their money, it's now all on them. But the good thing is that they have the ability now to do it, because you don't need the $2 million advance anymore. You can set aside your money delivering pizzas and have more than enough money to write, record, and release your own album, something that was impossible to do for less than $200,000 in the past. You can do now for the money you earn delivering pizzas. So now there's no excuse. You just can't wait around for other people to do it for you. You have to do all the hustling yourself, and no one else is going to do it for you. And if you're waiting to be discovered, keep waiting. But if you're willing to work and prove to everyone else why you're better than everyone else, then you're going to have to do it all by yourself. And then if someone comes around and offers you a legitimate record deal, that means you've succeeded. That means that you have become so rich by doing it yourself that someone else is going to invest their money because you're the guaranteed thing. That's the only way. You gotta quit waiting for other people. Be the record label yourself. Be the marketing company yourself. The radio promoter. The videographer. The film director. And there's no excuses anymore. Just make it. And if 500 people find it, great. That's 500 people who really enjoy your awesome music. If 500 million people hear it, well, you got lucky and you worked your ass off and you deserve it.
Wow. That was a great speech, Abe.
You're like,
Great.
shut up.
I would like to comment on that, though. You know, it's really interesting. I think it's always been that way, though.
It has,
but because even if you were on a label, or if you had somebody else, you had to make yourself the priority. It's not like
right.
people who were on it. I remember, and the funny thing is, though, you know, there have been all these myths about what's, you know, what happens, how it's really done. You know, it's funny because I was watching Jailhouse Rock there were a few weeks ago, might have been a few months ago, who knows, right? What is time? But you know, the whole idea of like, oh, you know, we're the artists, and since nobody else is going to play it, I have an idea. Let's go to radio stations ourselves and create our own label. And you know, that whole thing, you hear it, you know, I heard it written about in the press and the, you know, in the 80s, and you always, you know, people have always manufactured it as, oh, this is some new idea. But if you go back to Jailhouse Rock, the first thing that Elvis's character says in there, it's like, well, you know what? Let's start our own label. All the way back. So I think that really what's going on, or has been going on, is you have all these stories, or what I think are myths, or like that are passed on. And it's really the same thing, but it's just a different way.
Yeah. And this is the perfect statement. And I know that I'm way over my time, but I have really realized since I started my own label and failed, I've realized that the vast majority, almost 100% of my favorite record labels and the ones that have like been successful were created by musicians. And I think the reason that is that the artists that signed them are a lot more humble than the artists who just signed to a regular record label started by people who've not been touring musicians. Because if you start a record label and some artist that you sign, which is a very like special thing, like telling someone you are willing to like find money to invest in them is a really special thing. But a lot of artists just think that they're the greatest artists of all time, and they all think they should be on the cover of Rolling Stone. But if you're signed to someone who is already an established musician that you respect, and they see you given that attitude, they're gonna pull on your reins a little bit and say, "Ease down there, Eddie Starr. You know, you're good, but remember, I'm good too, and I'm gonna give you some sage advice. And you think that you deserve $2,000 for this radio promo, but you know that I'm already successful, and I'm saying no." You know, so they're way better at working with artists and managing expectations, and especially keeping their budgets very, very streamlined. Because when an artist would ask me, "Oh, I think we should do this," and my friend had them do this, and I'd be like, "Okay, cool." You know, even though I didn't have $4,000 to do it, but wow, you know, we had this opportunity that this other person did, and I'm going to find a way to get them $4,000 to do it. And of course, it didn't work. And if I would have been, Joan Jett with Blackheart Records, I would have said, no, we don't have that budget. You, just do a great job with this album, and hopefully the next one we will have it in our budget. I think that across the board, and I think if you think about it with me, all the best record labels were started by successful bands that had the business savvy and the guts to say, I'm going to start my own. And then they were able to manage expectations and keep their budgets in check. And so that made them way better business people than me.
I think,
And
but one thing I would like to encourage you to think about, maybe, Abe, when you look at things in hindsight, it's always 2020, right? But at the same time, you have to look at the things that were successful as part of that. I mean, had you not had your passion, I mean, for Willie Nile, for all these different people who are out there, and I think that not only, I don't think artists necessarily are the greatest business people for musicians. I mean, I will push back and say, look at people like you who really do have that passion for music. And you don't know, when we're doing things, whether it's businesses or music, or any project that you have, you don't know what the story, how it's going to end up, because the story is not over yet.
Right.
You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? With your label. So I wouldn't dub you or your label a failure.
Right. No, I mean, I appreciate you saying all those things.
Push back on that, because I think
Right.
the story is not over. And you
Right.
did a lot of good with that.
Oh, yeah.
Continuing to do that by being out there.
Oh, without a doubt. And I appreciate you saying that. And again, like I was just saying about the vinyl and the CDs, I mean, there are plenty of examples where some artists tried to start their own label and they were failures. I mean, it failed.
Yeah.
Not that they're failures, but and trust me, I mean, I know that there are several people who are not musicians who started labels and they were very successful. My favorite label of all time, Stax Records, was started by two business people in Memphis. It wasn't, it's not all across the board, but just like looking back at my own experience, which is all I can really do, is yes, there are some things I did correctly and there are some things I could have done better at. There were many times where I was so close to grabbing the gold ring, but I couldn't, like for one reason or another. And I'm grateful now that I didn't have more success, because it would have led to a whole other world of problems that I was not prepared to deal with at the time. I am right now exactly in the place where I'm supposed to be. And I'm like really content of where I am now. So I no longer view myself as a failure, but I definitely did along the way, because, on paper, I lost money. Whereas, like you said, so many cool experiences, so many people I was able to help would make me a huge success in most people's eyes, and so many of my, Naval Academy classmates who chose the career of being a hedge fund manager or a doctor or an engineer, and they make millions of dollars a year. When we get together in our, reunions, they say, wow, what I would give to be you for a month. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, I beat myself up every day, like trying to find enough money to buy food, and you're a millionaire. And they said, I've always loved music, and I would just love like one backstage pass. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. So it is all how you look at it. But my point being is, this is just something that I thought about recently, knowing that one of the hardest parts for me was to tell a musician no. That was where I was not a very good business person. I was not very good at telling people no, even when I knew it was the wrong decision. I wanted them to be happy with me, because that meant to me that I was being a good record label owner, because I wanted to be about the music first, the musicians first, not about bean counting. But I learned the hard lesson that the reason why these musicians wanted to work with me was to make money, not to be my friend, you know? And that's why I think if I would have been a musician and had been through that stuff, it might have helped me. And I think that's why, looking at how so many of the best record labels were started by musicians, I was just like, I get it now, because they are able to say no. And and the people still respect them enough where they want to stay with them. And I mean, if you even look at Epitaph Records, which is one of the biggest examples of this, I mean, they went through tons of problems of musicians turning their backs on them because they thought someone else could do it better. Or they wanted more money. And that's why, you know, when there were the bidding wars for like Offspring and Rancid, you know, some would leave and some would stay, or some would leave and then come back and say, hey, sorry about that. Can you release another one? And they're like, yeah, come on. You know, they usually buried the hatchet. But that's kind of why all these stories are so amazing, and why, you know, the music business is so exciting, is that, you know, everyone's just trying their best and no one knows what they're doing. And some people have massive success and then they lose it, or some people, you know, struggle for decades and then they make it.
Yeah.
Who knows? But how fun is it?
That's yeah, well, that's the whole point. It's, to me, it was always about music was always about, really about what was cool. You know what I mean? I guess that was just my thing, you know, about you know, whether it be the British glitter stuff, which I really love, you know, and you are right about that. There are so many new ways to, you know, get music, to access it, create it. There are so many tools today, but the one thing we always have to remember, it's how you use the tools, right?
Without a doubt.
Yeah. But
Without a doubt. I think the biggest example of it is just, you know, the live business right now, you know,
yeah,
um, knowing that it's such a big part of some artists' careers, and to some artists, it doesn't mean a thing, you know? So, but the question is, like, if you remove that from the equation, how can you hustle to still make a career from it, or at least make a little money from it, or maybe do better than you were before? Because again, like everything else, there's pros and cons of touring, you
yeah,
know. For a lot of independent bands, it really doesn't make a difference, because um, they weren't making any money from touring to begin with. So you got to keep hustling, getting your music out one way or another. And the good thing is there's so many ways to get it out.
yeah,
And the important part is keep creating content to the best of your ability, as much as you can. I mean, and keep your quality control high, and just stay diligent about spreading the word, and just try to do it as much as you can without like overdoing it and having people annoyed and unsubscribing. But as long as you're trying to stay creative and keep pushing it out with love, it's a matter of time before someone says, oh, I like this, and they forward it to a friend. And that's the way it happens now. Just like when you got introduced by the cool kids to Joan Jett, that's still happening. It's just that it's happening usually by pushing the forward thing or the copy and paste thing.
yeah.
And now it can happen faster than ever if the right cool person gets it and they have 50 million followers. It could change overnight, but that won't happen if you don't do the work and get it out there to begin with.
Yeah, I do have to admit though, I do miss all the, the Cream magazines and the uh, circus and stuff like that.
Yeah,
That was
and
great.
I think that those exist, but just in different ways now. You just got to find the blog
Yeah.
that you like,
Oh yeah.
and it cuts down on the amount of paper that's used, which is better for the environment, you know. But I do think that the same is vinyl. I think that there is a market out there, and if enough cool people say, "Hey, let's make a print magazine," then there will be that Cream magazine that people do still lay down their money and say, "I want this delivered 3 times a year or 30 times a year, depending on how bold you want to be." And there's still a market for it, you know? But that's the beautiful thing is like, if you if you believe in something enough and you really make it great and undeniable, people are willing now to spend the money to be a part of something that they think is cool. I
Yeah.
mean, if you like look at the world of trading cards now, like I mentioned earlier, I went to like baseball card conventions. Like I have not paid attention to sports cards in decades, but now amongst my group of friends, one of my friends is into that world, and he has like informed me of how it's never been bigger for sports cards, and that they're selling for millions and millions of dollars for these new cards through Bitcoin and everything, and it's just like unbelievably lucrative business right now. So if the sports card industry would have been just sitting around complaining that their business had changed from the glory days, then they would have missed this opportunity. Now they're making millions of dollars because it's all of a sudden cool. And that means a piece of cardboard that has a picture on it and some information in the back that you used to like put in your spokes of your bicycle, now you can sell for millions of dollars. And these are not Mickey Mantles from 1952. These are like today's cards for LeBron James and Zion and these like new basketball players. I mean, if you read any article about it, it is mind blowing. And it's also very exciting for anyone in any industry that if you are forward thinking enough in any industry, you have the ability where you can change something overnight into a totally different business now. And that means, manufacturers of Fender guitars or this type of speaker, Marshall amps, or any facet of the industry. Publishing now is headlines,
Yeah.
from my old boss, Mercuriadis, going on a feeding frenzy and buying Bob Dylan's catalog and dozens of others. It's amazing how things change, but if you believe in something and you just keep trying to be, I hate the expression thinking outside of the box because it's absolutely not thinking outside of the box to say that expression. But if you keep doing that, then you might be the one who discovers the next big technology that people are like, oh, that's cool. I always like basketball cards. I don't know.
Well, Abe, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Of course, I appreciate it too, Eddie. Thanks for asking new questions that I hadn't heard in a while.
Well, I really want
Forever.
to. I'll just say this to you. One of the things, like I said, I've always admired about you is really your passion for music and that whole dedication that you always had to whatever project you were working on. It was really rare to see. And yeah, like I said, remember the story's not done yet.
I
So
know. I can't believe you used past tense by saying the passion I had.
Well, I know. Yeah, I know. You
I'm
have
just kidding.
passion. I shouldn't say. Yeah. But no, well, I'm talking about I guess that whole window of of just seeing how you interacted with people, and I mean, so yes, Abe Bradshaw still has fucking passion, okay?
Thank you.
But I am going to require two things of you. Remember, you have to give me a photo of you. You have to email me that, and also
Okay.
a list of 20 songs.
Okay.
And here, that's your opportunity to, what did you say? Send it on, right?
Pay it forward.
Yeah.
What are the instructions for the 20 songs? I did not see
No,
this.
it's 20 songs that you think are important, that are important to you, that you would like to share.
All right. I am my favorite thing to do, which wastes all my time because I can't stop, is make playlists on Spotify. So I am thrilled to narrow down my 20 for you. And
It can be longer if you want. I mean, it's up to you. I always tell funny.
Please, I need a limit.
Some
I have a serious one. All right, so I'm writing this down. 20 songs for Eddie.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, these are going to knock your socks off.
All right.
That's one thing I guarantee.
Well, I hope so. And what do I have to say now before we wrap up? I have to say, if you are on YouTube, you can share this, like this, click the bell, do what you do. We're on Spotify as well. And leave it there, Abe. You rock.
Awesome. So do you, man. Thank you.
All right. Let me end the recording.
I'll be what you want me to be. The darkness will turn to light. I'm your dirty secret tonight. Dream or not and take a look inside. The Peepshow is what you hide.
Eddie Stars, The College of Rock and Roll Knowledge, is a production of Ton Up Incorporated. Copyright 2021, Ton Up Incorporated.